Hi there, thanks for joining me. So today we're looking at a Schecter Hellraiser Hybrid C-7 in Trans Black Burst. Heavy metal AF. Ricky, let's do it. So just going through the initial inspection then, the truss rod is looking a little bit too tight. We've got a little bit of an overbow. However, we are putting thicker strings on the guitar, so that might mean that we don't have to loosen off the truss rod. But we'll get to that once we've put the new strings back on. Specs wise, this is a 2014. It's made in Indonesia. It's got a 12 to 16 inch compound radius on it. What that means is you've got a 12-inch radius up to sort of roughly here, and then from there all the way down to here, the radius gets essentially flatter as it gets all the way down to this 24th fret. Frets are in pretty good condition, but we are going to polish them up later as we always do. So little truss rod adjustment. Obviously we're going to go through all the bits and pieces. This comes with EMG 57 in the bridge and a 66 in the neck. The pickups are leading kind of one way and kind of a little bit wonky, so we're going to use some rubber inserts on those later on and just kind of straighten that up so everything's doing what it should. Pots are rattling around and output jack's a little bit loosey-goosey, so we'll tighten that up, clean that up. We'll do all the usual bits and pieces. Valuing this about 800 quid, something like that. And it's got a 26.5 inch scale. So it's kind of somewhere between a standard 25.5 inch and a baritone 27. It's kind of in the middle there. So strings wise, we are going to be using Diodarios. Pop that back up there. Didario strings, we're using the NYXLs 11 to 64, but we are swapping out the 64 for a 80, so it's going to be 80 through 11, and we're just going to get rid of that 64. Moving quickly onto the tools, just the usual tools for this. So I've got my good quality crescent snips, string winder, we've got Lindstrom needle nose pliers and snips. We have our 3 StewMac nut drivers. We've got this Big Ben's nut sauce that I use to lubricate the nut slots. Music Nomad Guitar 1 all-in-one polish and cleaner. Contact cleaner, WD-40 contact cleaner. We've got some Peak fret polish, which we're using with the Dremel wheel, which is right here. Hello. So I think that's all we're using tools wise. By the way, just to make things a little bit easier for you, if you've seen some tools that you like and you haven't got, there's links to them below in the description. Just click on them, it'll take you straight to the product. Might be an Amazon link or it might be a direct with StewMac, etc. So yeah, hit up the links below and you'll find some quality tools. Do you know what I mean? Strings, etc. So let's get started on this. We're going to be working through this checklist that I always do. You can download these for free off my website. So if you want to do a setup yourself, not quite sure what you need to do, this tells you absolutely everything in order, what we need to be doing. So where should we start? We're going to take the strings off then and just get cracking with this. This guitar's got locking machine heads on it, which are fine. I've said in previous videos, I'm not a huge fan of locking tuners. They do a good job on the thinner strings, but they're not so great on the thicker strings because the pin in the center of the thing can actually break the string when you're putting it on. So with locking tuners, I always do at least one full wind around it before I lock it. Don't pull the string all the way through and lock it because you're not going to be able to stretch the strings properly. So little tip there. Obviously that's just what I do. I'm not saying you have to do it, but in my experience, winding them round is a good idea because it's just minimizing the chances that the pin in the center of that locking machine head is going to snap the string, which obviously we don't want. It also just means that you can stretch the strings a lot tighter, a lot firmer when we get to that stage of the setup. Just want to give a shout out to everyone out there who's subscribed as well. I only launched this a few weeks ago. Loads of people have been reaching out and saying lovely things, so really appreciate that. Thank you, appreciate it. So we're just going to tighten up these machine heads at the moment. Are we getting this on action cam? There, on there. We're just doing this. This is the StewMac 10mm nut driver. Depending on what the guitar is, where it comes from, where it's made, where the hardware is made, you are usually going to get a bit of a mix of imperial and metric, so it's a good idea to have both. I'm just going to move all these tools out of the way actually, because I put them there just to show you. A clean workbench is a happy workbench. Let's start by giving him a little bit of a clean down. I'm just going to swap these cloths around. It is lovely and tidy in here as well. So at this stage when I'm cleaning it off, if it's not particularly dirty, I don't use any products at all. Literally just your cloth, and all we're doing is just getting this top layer off. Top layer of dust and muck and stuff like that. We're a little bit dusty underneath these saddles, but we should be able to get underneath it with these quite easily, so no need to take them off today. Clean up the back as well. It's a through neck on this one as well, so it's a big ass chunky neck that's ready to go, ready to rock. Active pickups as well, so we'll be testing the battery, making sure that that's all good. 9-volt batteries tend to meter around 9.6, 9.5 volts, but anything sort of, you know, in and around 9 volts is fine. If it's any less than that, I just bang a new one in personally. You can buy 9-volt battery testers out there. In fact, I'll click a link to one. There you go. Boom. So just to quickly check, we're just going to make sure that the screws on the back of these machine heads are all working as they should and they're nice and tight, which they're not. So it's a good job we checked that. Okay, that's good. So before we move on to the fretboard, I'm just going to open up this 80 gauge string and just make sure that it fits through the machine head. If it doesn't, we'll just need to drill that out. Yeah, so that is definitely going to need drilling. So we'll just masking tape it off just to protect all the areas. Yeah. Defo on the 2.5. You're always best doing this in stages as well, so if you're trying to drill anything, whatever it is on the guitar, make sure you're putting a 1mm pilot hole in, and if you say you're drilling up to 3mm and you're starting at 1, just go in 5mm, 0.5 increments, that way you're not going to snap anything off. Always blow the shards away rather than using a cloth. That way you're not going to rip anything or tear anything. Now we've drilled that out, we're just going to cut a little bit of sandpaper just to pop through the hole. You want to cut it really nice and thin. So you're left with just a little piece that looks like that. And then once you've got your little bit, it's a bit tricky this, just fold it in half. And then that's just going to pop through there. And all we're doing now is just smoothing out the inside, just getting rid of those rough burrs from the drilling. So that's it, they're nice and steady, nice and clean. Small amount of polish. Actually, while we're doing that, we'll just take the truss rod cover off. Always handy to have a little tub for your parts, for your bits and pieces. Polished and ready to go. And while we've got this open, I'm just going to get a truss rod in there, truss rod Allen, just to make sure we've got the right size before we put the strings on, which we have. Okay, so next we're going to be moving on to the nut slots, so we're just going to give them a little bit of a clean out. This looks to me like a graphite nut, so it's probably self-lubricating, so I'm not going to put any lubricant in this today. But I'm just going to do what I usually do and just use a bit of 2,500 and file these nut slots out. Well, not file them, just sort of soften them up. So at 2,500, it's sort of thin enough that you're not going to be wearing down sort of too much of the slot. And just to stress, I don't do this every single time you put new strings on. It's just, you know, I'll do this every time a guitar gets brought in, say for like an annual setup or whatever. If you do this every day or whatever, you are going to find that it's going to start filing your nut slots down, which you don't want to do in most cases. So just use this just to kind of smoothen out the inside. And this, literally that's it. Just softens everything up, and if there's any kind of like rough edges in there that's got in, this will just kind of smoothen them out. If we move on to the frets now, if you look at the edges of these frets here, they're kind of, we've got some corrosion on there. So we're going to masking tape off the whole board, come back to these and polish them up. So the best way to do this is to start on the length. So basically you want to put a piece of tape here, a piece of tape there, and then tape them all like that afterwards. That way that when you come to peel off the side bit first, you can kind of take the whole thing off in one go. So little Deanie tip for you there. So I prefer to do this just kind of completely flat. Line up with the edge of the frets. Nice straight line. And you're just lining the tape up here with the straight edge of the fret tang. Okie dokes. So, just going to start flat against it like that. Cool, so the fretboard's all taped off now, so just going to apply a little bit of this peat compound that I use. Just make sure when you're doing this you just cover everything up, just so you're not flicking compound everywhere. If you're using a buffing wheel as well, make sure you pop some glasses on. Okay, you can see how shiny these are now. And as I've said before, there's two reasons for doing this. Obviously the first one is cosmetic, it looks really good. But the second thing, probably the most important one, is it takes all those kind of little tiny rough edges that appear on fret. I'm not talking about indentations, because obviously to sort them out you have to level it and, you know, be doing a lot more work than this. I'm just talking about when you're bending the string, feeling any kind of like, almost feels like if you were pressing it against sand or something like that. It's sort of a little grainy and a bit crunchy. Buffing and polishing the frets like this is the best way to do it. You don't need a fancy 200 quid Dremel polishing wheel like I've got. You can just use a standard, you know, 20 quid, 30 quid little Dremel, little electric one, or whatever you would like to use. Remember what I said earlier about putting the long bit on first? This is why. When you come to take it off, you can just peel the whole thing like that. Get it halfway and then do the same on the back side. The back side. Just going to put a light application of lemon oil on it as well. And we'll just leave that there to soak in for a little while. So one thing I want to do just while everything's off and I'm thinking about it is just fix this pickup. So I don't know if you can notice it's kind of bending down at the moment. There's something either pressing down on it or there's something wedged underneath it, like a cable loom or the pins or whatever. So we'll just take this out, hope that there's enough slack on it to get it all the way out. Okay. First of all, these aren't even. So yeah, if you can see there where the cable's been pushing into this bit of foam here, and that's why it's sitting like that, because that wire's resting there. So I'm just going to cut that bit of foam out, because it's still got plenty of foam underneath it to keep it in situ. Done it over the top of the pickup as well, that's interesting. So to just do this really, really, really carefully. Obviously you don't want to be cutting into the pickup at all. And just freeing up that space underneath there. I'm just going to neaten it up with my little Lindstrom snips. So when we go to put this back in, and it folds back on itself, it will go underneath the pickup rather than on top of that bit of foam. So the other thing I'm going to do now is, why are these two different sizes? Got a short one and a long one. Yeah, whoever's put these in's made a bit of a balls up of it. So just to keep this in situ, I'm going to use this little, can we see that there? It's just a little rubber mount. You can get these from Armstrong Music, I'll link you up to these, and basically what I'm going to do is pop this underneath, pop the screw through the pickup, through this bit of tubing to the bottom side, and it's just going to basically hover everything up and just give it some more tension to work against. So it'll keep it, it'll feel more solid, it won't rattle around as much, and you don't need to use much of this at all. What have we got there, about 4mm. There's a countersunk thread on one side but not on the other. I'm not really sure why that is, but so it's going to go under there now. Okay, so the other thing that's causing this is the wire that's coming behind it. Okay, so to fix all these problems in one go, what I'm going to do is just get rid of this foam completely. I'm going to put some tall rubber mounts in, so that all underneath of the pickup is free. There's a bit of a gap underneath it, but that it'll still be rubber mounted, shock mounted, and not moving anywhere. So let's try some slightly bigger ones. That's better. Beautiful. Now that's nice and solid and nice and straight. We've got the pickup reseated nice, so it's not sort of on the piss anymore, it's sort of nice and flat. We've put those rubber bungs inside there, either side of the screw, and it's worked an absolute treat. It's nice and solid in there now. So we're going to move on to removing these knobs, just so we can get to the pots underneath. Make sure they're nice and tight. Cool, so while we've got this apart, we'll just put some switch cleaner into the switch. Directly into that gap, and then you're just going to do this a bunch of times. Quick wipe down with the cloth, get rid of that excess lemon oil, which is absorbed into there beautifully. Look at this neck now, it's like brand new. Put some fresh gloves on. Snuck out for my lunch then. Back plate off. Pots look like they're all working as they should. Let's get some switch cleaner inside the pots Make sure you get right inside the groove of the pot. Wicked. We'll just do a quick click test just to make sure that everything is still working. Tone. Wicked. So that's great. Happy with that. We can button everything back up now. We'll just take a look at this battery. Stick a meter on it. Just see what kind of voltage we're running. Oof, 3.2. Needless to say, that needs replacing then. So we'll recycle the old battery. We'll stick in a new one. I tend to use the Pro cells, Duracell Pro cells. Generally the best ones to use in my experience. I'm just going to tighten up the output jack now and give it a clean. Our little knobs can go back on. Give it a bit of a clean up as we go. That is all looking fantastic. I think the next thing now is going to be, we'll get some strings on the guitar. Happy with all the electronics. So we've done the pots, we've done the output jack, we've done the switch. And they're all lovely and clean. And then we're going to start pulling these strings through. So gauge wise, we've got a 7-string set here, which is the D'Addario, however you say it, NYXL 1164 set. But as I said before, we're going to be replacing the 64 with an 80, an 80. The reason we're doing that is because this young man is having this in drop G 7-string tuning. Sorry, drop G sharp. We're not going to be using the 64, so we'll put them to one side because we replaced that with the 80. So the next one we're going to be doing is 49, followed by 38, followed by 28, followed by 18, 14, 11. We'll get our little intonation bits and pieces ready. So that one's gone. For adjusting the height of the saddles, it's a 1.3mm Allen head. But before we consider any of that, we're just going to get the strings on, tune it up to pitch. So I've said this before, sorry if I'm repeating myself if you watched other videos, but just, you know, just kind of bearing in mind people that might have not watched any of the other videos. So as I said before, with locking tuners, fine to use, but with thicker strings, you need to be really careful. Don't pull the string all the way through like that and lock it off, because you're only going to get a little bit of whine there. And as soon as you lock that pin up, it's going to snap the string, or it's going to at least bend it in the middle and make it prone to snapping. So I do what I always do with this, which is pull back 1 fret, then lock it off, and then wind the excess round. And that way you've still got a nice solid foundation of the string wrapped around the machine head, over the top, under the bottom. And then when it comes back round here, it's going to sandwich in that little space there. Now, arguably, it doesn't look as clean, doesn't look as neat and tidy. Well, it'll look a lot neater when I cut the edge off. But yeah, like, arguably, doesn't look as solid. But trust me, it's way more solid to do it like that than it is to pull through and lock it off. So you want to make sure you've got a good wind. This way, we can tighten it up. Now that string's actually sitting in there perfectly, so it's already slotted for a thicker string, which is great. So first string is going to be drop G. If you haven't watched these videos before, or you haven't used a strobo tuner before, if the circles are going this way, it means it's sharp. If it's going that way, it means it's flat. The aim of the game is to get it so they're not moving at all. So that's a little sharp, flat, 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 in tune. Just get it dialed in for now. Pull it nice and tight through, back 1 fret, tighten up the lug, wind. My bad, I wrote C sharp instead of D sharp. In fact, I think the customer might have done that, but I'm not blaming them, it's fine. Little amendment, so D sharp. Same again, all the way up, pulling back a fret, lock it off, then wind. Okay, so all the strings are on. I'm just going to push here, push, 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 push. Down, 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 down. Okay, now we're not going to stretch the strings yet. So next thing, now we put these thicker strings on, we're going to see what the neck's doing. Have a quick look at the neck. Now we had a slight overbow on it before, and we've been absolutely blessed because the thicker strings have pulled it enough far forward so that now the neck is completely straight. So might be a little bit too straight. We'll have a little play on it now and see what we do. So straight away this string is way too high, so we're going to lower this down. Even though the string did fit into that nut slot, it's still a little bit too high for my liking. So I'm just going to file this down slightly wider. I don't have an 80 nut file, so I'm just going to widen it up to 90. That's at a perfect height now. So now I'm going to get my 12-inch radius gauge. I'm going to have a look at the radius, make sure that's all good. If it is, we'll move on to sorting the intonation. Okay, so a couple of the strings here, the saddles here are way too low. Take that middle one up just a touch. And this is really just a case of basically making sure that the string, the radius, so by radius I mean the curvature of the neck, that the strings and the saddles here are following that same curve. So if they're all flat, for example, they'd all be buzzing all over the place. So that looks really good for me from a playing point of view. Right, so we'll just do the individual strings now. I'll unmute it so you can hear it. So that's flat because it's going this way. So this saddle now is going to need to go a fair old bit. Really nice saddles, these hip shop ones as well. A little bit flat. If it's flat, it goes that way. If it's sharp, it goes that way. Easy. A little sharp. Right then, see what this sounds like. So that's all she wrote for this beautiful Schecter guitar. Everything's kind of gone back together. The last thing I'm going to do now is stretch up the strings and just head it back with the customers here. So I'm going to do that while he's here with us. So I'm going to wrap everything up now. Obviously, we'll put the truss rod cover back on as well. So this has been a 2014 Schecter Hellraiser Hybrid C-7 with EMG pickups. Sounds fantastic, very dark, very girthy, very metal. Yeah, really nice, new battery. Not much needed doing to it. We've got these beautifully polished up frets now, playing way better. We've got the intonation set and the radius and everything like that. So it's, yeah, really happy. Thanks for checking it out. If you've enjoyed the video, please subscribe and tune in for more vids coming soon. Thank you. See you later.